Welcome to Sinister Heroes. I'm your host, Danny Iniquitous. Thank you for tuning in. If you're new to the channel, this is a channel about Dungeons and Dragons, where we try and take a darker tone with everything we do here. So if you like edgier kind of content, definitely hit that like and subscribe buttons. Check us out on Patreon. The link is in the description. A big thank you to all our Patreon supporters. What you do is absolutely amazing. And a big shout out to our good friends at Dice Legion. Check out their website and use the promo code SINISTER for 10% off all of your purchases. With that out of the way, let's talk about why illusions are so bad. Illusions are really exciting to draw inspiration from. If you look at characters like Loki, who uses illusions constantly, or if you look at Pennywise from the It movies, they are great masters of illusion. They use them constantly. They sway people's mindsets, opinions, cause them to make wrong turns or believe falsehoods. It's a very cool thing that they programmed into their kit to make them mischievous and exciting. And because of that ability, they're able to do things on a grander scale, because they're able to do things that no one else could, because there's a certain level of risk and reward involved with tricking someone. And when you're out of the immediate view, when you can use magic to do that, it really ups the ante on the kind of risk that you can take. So it draws in a lot of character ideas and concepts, but in the end, a lot of these end up being more than people can chew, and it's a lot for them to take on, and a lot of times it falls apart, and one or two bad things going the wrong way can really be problematic for you. Illusions really come down to a two-part problem, and first and foremost there's the player side and then the DM side, and a lot of this is a trained thought process that's kind of been put into us in the way the mechanics are set up in the game. We're going to get into a little bit more depth into that as the video goes on, but we just want to talk about what illusions are in concept and in practice. So in concept, an illusion is some sort of trick, some sort of spell, something that produces an image, a sound, or a scent or something to throw off, confuse, or muddle whoever you're aiming it at. It can be a variety of different things. If you look at imagery like a skeleton jumping out from the ground or something like that, that can be an illusion. It can deter someone, it can frighten someone, it can cause someone to make a turn or a decision that they wouldn't normally make. It's a great way, in theory, to change the outcome of events. You might use it to cause an enemy to attack something that's not there, or to give your enemy a reason to follow out in a direction and then maybe set up an ambush. In theory, these things are phenomenal. Set up a blank wall in front of you so that way the enemy can walk right by and not conceive actually attacking you. But the problem comes in really its practice, and we're going to break down why that is in just a moment. So let's first talk about the player's side of this gambit. It is a necessary thing to try and use these abilities often. A lot of the times people conceive these abilities to be used as a rarity, as something that has to be really held off and hold on to. You really need to use these abilities frequently. And the reason why I say that is because you need to be able to use it like a reflex. And once you get to that comfortability with your DM and using your illusions, you really have this great ability to now use them in creative ways. You just got to get used to saying, you know what, first thing I'm going to do, minor illusion. First thing I'm going to do, silent image. Things like that are going to be really important to how you use illusions. A lot of the times, again, players don't use these abilities because of fear of using something else in a better spot. When most of the problem are nails, then the best solution is a hammer. So you see a room full of goblins? Yeah, great, throw a fireball. Boom, problem solved. But when you start to really break away from that concept and leave some of that damage and damage per round towards other characters, you can really play around with things. So combat is a very big deterrent for using illusions, but it can be an asset. One of the greater things that I mentioned is maybe using it to draw an opponent out. You can use minor illusion to create the sound of steel hitting like a wall and making that stone crunching sound. And that might draw somebody closer to a wall that's further away from you, and when they come up, you can't ambush. It's a concept that requires a little bit of out-of-the-box thinking. In role-playing and adventuring settings, if you're hidden from the party and maybe out of sight from whoever you're talking to or something, this might be a great way to emphasize something or really give advantage to someone, maybe trying to intimidate or trying to charm someone. Doing something like that might really be beneficial to them. create an image of like a light like shining on the person, or a pleasant smell or scent rising up as they're talking to someone, might help give them a reason to be believable, maybe even give persuasion an advantage. But these are things you got to be risky and willing to take those risks in order to do, because someone's going to see you casting magic. And depending on how the outcome is would really affect what that means. So a big part of it is player use, and breaking the mode of sometimes going, you know what, maybe damage isn't the best option. I'll go into a little bit more depth later on in the video on some ways you can use this. So the DM side of illusions is really a very difficult place to be in, because if you leave illusions unchecked, like as if they were in the real world, then they are way too powerful. And what I mean by that is, when was the last time you were talking to someone and you put your hand through to see if they're real? Last time you saw a door and then just put your hand through to see if it was real? Last time you saw something and went, you know what? I'm not sure if that's a real thing. It's not a common practice where we are to not believe what we're seeing. And in D&D, it's so often that any character will just walk up to a circumstance and see something, and then the character will automatically make a check to see if it's real. And that's not really allowing the illusion to take place. If you're using silent image and you're creating a moving wolf walking with you, and you're just a bandit and you walk up and you look at the wolf, your first thought would be, how does the bandit react to this? And you try and play it out based on maybe the stat points or maybe some of the interesting facts about that bandit. You don't walk up, say a piece, and then stick your sword through the wolf, because that doesn't make any sense from a logical standpoint. But in D&D, it does. Some DMs will use passive perception to give a reason to believe that maybe something was off, and give them a plausible cause to make an investigation check to try and see if it works, or see if that's fake. But unless this bandit happens to be robbing and stealing from wizards constantly, it really doesn't fly. And that's a big deterrent for players to use this. That's a lot of reasons why DMs kind of take illusions and really break them down. Because if you don't, then they do become entirely too strong. Then why on earth would the bandit try and rob these people? There's a giant bugbear or an owl bear there with them. That's scary. That's intimidating. Let's back off. Like, what if this guy makes an image of a dragon flying great in a distance that it looks small, but it's really just like a silent image of 15 feet, and you're just exclaiming, look, this thing is coming closer. We need to get in there and warn the people, otherwise there's going to be panic. Then it's really strong, because now you just cleared out an entire village of people running away from a dragon that isn't even there. So I get there has to be a balance, but there has to be a plausible reason why someone who's seeing an image would believe it's false and an illusion. If you're a magic user, yeah, you know what? That check comes pretty easy. But if you're not, if you're running into a bunch of goblins and hobgoblins, yeah, it's probably pretty hard for them, if none of them are spellcasters, to guess that that's an illusion. Or if they don't know your party well enough to guess that that's an illusion. These tricks can be dynamic if they're left unchecked, and I get that. But there is a certain release that you have to have in order to let an illusion play out. And illusions can't do damage. If they're found out, are detrimental to the party, because now you just try to trick somebody very, very important. You just try to sneak your way in or out of something. There is a huge amount of risk of being caught casting an illusionary spell to get something you want. That alone, that risk is a high intensity moment, and allowing those to play out is so much more exciting and fun for everyone than just going, you know what, let me make this check right away and blow this whole thing away. It takes a little bit of trust to know that your party isn't going to abuse this, and you have to give them the chance to prove that. It's a great way to really, really let some things work out in a creative way and solve problems without making your party a murder hobo group the entire time. but it's a risk. And if left unchecked, like I said, it can become too powerful. But at higher levels, almost everything you have at it that's going to be a boss level entity is going to have true sight, and it just will not work on them. So using illusions is a very, very tactical thing. You need to use them if you're using in adventuring settings, if you're using them in stealth settings, in combat settings. It's all very, very dramatic. First and foremost, my favorite use of illusions is in sneaking around. If you're trying to infiltrate something, a great way to deter people is to be aware of your surroundings. Maybe you check something out by making a sound on another side of the room or something, or say there's a couple of alleyways intersecting. Get into a safe distance and make a sound like something dropped. And then if someone comes to investigate, there you go. That's your moment. Give it a few seconds to see if anybody else comes through, and then jump them. Getting a surprise round is deadly. You can take out like half a group of enemies in one turn with the whole party moving in unison. It's very impactful. Another great way is if you're trying to spy on someone and you guys all manage to already be in somewhere. You can replicate walls behind you with silent image, and that's a pretty big area. It is a 15-foot cube, so you can have a couple of people standing next to each other who will fit inside that. And as long as they don't move, they can hear what's going on around them. It's a very, very great way to use the circumstances around you and find out some information. Set yourselves up. It's a great way to manipulate circumstances. Say you're in a situation where you need to impersonate someone and you can figure out a way to just not talk. Maybe you use silent image and then you motion people just to go into a different direction and look like a commander of the military group. Just put the finger up to be quiet. Point to your ears for people and eyes so that way people look, and send them in a complete opposite direction, and then you just wait for them to go, and then you turn around and leave. That could have saved you an encounter worth of resources. You can do creative things combat-wise and adventuring-wise. In role-playing and adventuring settings, it is dangerous, but you can come up with a couple of great things. Like, you could use some of these sounds and make great bolstering voices come out of the sky. If you're meeting with tribal people, this might be enough to cause them to not attack you. If you know enough about what's going on in the world and what is happening, you might be able to make a silent image of a swirling symbol. That's that's a sigil of a deity that some of these people worship, and that's a sign. Maybe that's good enough for them to at least hear you out. You can be very, very creative as long as you take the time to take the risk and really conceptualize what these images mean to you. Illusions requires a lot of out-of-game work. You can't just show up and just drop illusions and assume it's going to happen. It doesn't work that way. It's so hard to come up with illusions and concepts on the fly. You have to be wildly creative, and I am not that intelligent to do so. So what I like to do is I like to sit down and I like to plan out when I get a next illusionary spell or something I can do with it. And I like to sit down and I like to think about, well, I can do these things with silent image. I can create this size. What can I do with it? Where are we going? And I really take a lot of time out of game to come up with ways to be creative about things like that. I do this with all my characters, regardless if I have spells or not. I just try to come up with scenarios so I can be creative about when I use my abilities. Yeah, it's extra work, but I love and I think about the game constantly anyway, so it kind of just fits into a new driving force when I'm thinking about a concept or an idea or a character to play. Take the time to come up with illusions and theories and how you want to do them. There's a bunch of different illusions. There's a bunch of different illusion spells, and they all do different things. And they are very, very different for the purposes, for their uses, and how they're expected to be done. Take your time, and when you acquire those spells and abilities, think about how you would want to use them. And make sure that you have a long conversation before you even start creating your illusionary character with your DM and understand what their limits are and their plausible way of interacting with an illusion, like how their mind works when they come up to it. Are they the one that's going to walk up to it and immediately make a check, or are they going to wait for something particularly to happen? Like if nothing happens, if none of the parties actually touch anything or nobody walks into it, is that still going to cause a check after a certain amount of time is gone? This really makes a difference. And it's important to know where they stand before jumping into a game where you're playing a character that's just gotten just nerfed beyond belief because all of your skills and spells don't work. It's very, very difficult. And it's very important to note what campaign you're in. If you're fighting a bunch of mindless undead, they're just going to walk up and attack everything anyway, so illusions really aren't going to benefit you. It's got to require a certain level of intelligence of the enemy you're fighting. Not too smart, but smart enough that if they see something they don't want to fight, that they stay away from it. And that's a dangerous balance to be at, but at session 0, you should get a lot of that cleared up when you talk about, well, what are we going to be up against? Is there anything that we shouldn't be doing because it's just not going to be optimal for the campaign? You know, like oh, we're going to fight undead, so should we all just do necrotic damage with everything? You know, everything should be poison, right? We can do that? No, you got to know what campaign you're in, and that's an important thing. So talking to the DM when creating any kind of illusionist character is wildly important. All that being said, we're going to bring this video to a close. Thank you so much if you made it all the way this far. We really appreciate it when you do that. Definitely hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't. Definitely check us out on Patreon. And a big thank you to all our Patreon supporters. We love you guys. It's incredible what you guys do. And thank you so much. A big thank you again to Dice Legion, to all of them out there who help us all out with that great promo code Sinister to get 10% off everything that you purchase. And when all said and done, thank you for giving a spooky kid a chance.